Welcome into Rounding the Bases.
Round the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg. It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.
Hey, everybody, welcome in to another episode of Rounding the Bases presented by Community America Credit Union. Got a really fun episode for you today. You know, I sometimes will dive into baseball. There's always baseball theme-wise with this podcast, but I'm going all in on it today with one of my favorite people in the game that I'm so lucky to cover. A quick shout out to my friends at Chief of Staff Kansas City. If you're in the hunt in the market for a job, looking to find somebody, give them a shout. chiefofstaffkc.com, making connections that matter. They really believe in culture. Got a great event coming up with them in the off season. We'll tell you about that more in the future. I'm recording this right before Labor Day. It'll run right after Labor Day. And of course, these podcasts live forever. So we won't get too deep into the weeds in terms of predictions and this and that. Not that we know exactly what's going to happen, but there's a lot of fun stuff going on in baseball. And I can tell you that having just survived a rain delay and a doubleheader in Cleveland, one of those two things always happens, by the way. Well, one might be a product of the other. Anyway, we oftentimes entertain ourselves by hanging out with our colleagues and just chatting and hanging out and killing time during those rain delays. And my guest today certainly is one of those guys that is fun to spend that time with. He has been in the game forever. 35th season as the play-by-play voice of the Cleveland Guardians and one of the best voices in the game. It helps for me that he's a Wisconsin guy. Well, he's a pure Wisconsin guy. I just happen to go to school there and have a lot of heart in that state. That's my very informal introduction to the great Tom Hamilton. Hammy, how you doing?
Good, Joel. Thank you for the kind words. The feeling is mutual, and yeah, we're fellow cheeseheads. So, you're one of my favorites as well. It was so good catching up with all of you guys, and I've said this to you. I've said it to everybody. I mean, there's not an organization I have more respect for than the Royals, and it starts with Mr. Sherman, whom we got to know when he was a minority owner here in Cleveland, and then the days of Dayton Moore, and now the incredible job that J.J. Picola and Scott Sharp have done. Of course, Q started his major league coaching career here in Cleveland with Tito as like a third hitting coach. And I asked Tito one day about that, Joel, and he said, look, we just knew we had to get him on the staff. We just knew what an asset that he would be. So it didn't really matter what his title was. We just wanted him as part of the staff. And now you see why. Obviously, they saw something maybe other people hadn't. And now Q is, in my mind, the runaway manager of the year in the American League. So, it's just there's so many similarities, I think, between the two organizations, which is why I root. Of course, I also have a son who's a scout with the Royals, but yeah. I root as hard for Kansas City as I do Cleveland.
All right, there are a lot of places I want to go with this because first off, if anyone that is listening to this podcast is saying, oh, he says that to every city he's on and all of that, what a politician, this Hamilton guy, which I'm not saying that you are. I hope that you never are a politician. I don't see you going that route, but I think that you do always have nice and amazing things to say about people because you make such an effort to get to know people. But I know that your connection and your affection for the Royals organization is deep. That you were saying that before your son worked there as a scout. You were saying, but I bring all that up because I think, and it's one of the things that I like to talk about on this podcast, well beyond baseball, is that no matter what profession you're in, it's all about people. There might be a few that are in something where they don't ever have to talk to anybody and have no clients and all of that. And that just sounds like a vacation to the beach or something like that. But I watch. There are essentially 30 people that do what you do in the game. And there are some that share it and all of that, but maybe 30 lead voices on radio. And everybody has their own style. I'm not saying what's right or wrong. Some people get down there and they get to know everybody. Other people never leave the booth. You have to do what works for you. It's the same thing for my position. I guess I would say I need to be in the middle of it a little bit more from a reporting standpoint. But I watch the way that you take the time to get to know the opposing teams, not just their manager, but their media relations people, their broadcasters, their players who, of course, come and go. even the ushers, whatever it is, which to me is one of the best parts of the game. How important is that for you? Because Hammy, I think I always smile when people say, "You guys know everything. You know every stat." Well, anybody can know everything if they're handed the information or know how to look it up a little bit. It's the people that you get to know that shape the broadcast that you do. How important is that to you as a person and as a broadcaster?
Well, I think you summed it up. I mean, first and foremost, um, why wouldn't you want to get to know people? We're in the people business. We're in the communication business. To me, that's the most fun part of it. Look, in 1990, when I started with the Indians, I was closer in age to the players. And
Mm-hmm.
so occasionally you could go out and have beers with the players and maybe have a dinner or whatnot. Now the players look at you and they're like, look, Grandpa, let's talk. We don't need to have a beer. Plus, I wouldn't go to the hotel bar and have a beer anymore because somebody'd have a phone to make it look like a compromising situation. So times have changed here over the last 35 years. But when I got the job, Joel, one, you feel like you won the lottery. I mean, I was born on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. And then in seventh grade, we sold the farm and moved to the metropolis of Waterloo, which still doesn't. So for me, being able to come off a farm and be around people, that was so exciting. Anybody that's grown up on a farm, it's a great way to grow up, and I appreciate it even more now. But when you're on the farm, you're like, there are no schoolyard buddies or any neighbors or anything like that. It's you and your siblings, and so the best part of this job is meeting people. When I could meet
Yeah.
an Ernie Harwell or a Vin Scully when I started in 1990, that to me was like meeting the Pope or the president and whatnot. That was as big a deal. And I mean, I think you learn, as you know, and you're the same way in how you treat people. First off, who are we to think we're above anybody? And, there was never a better example here in Cleveland, Joel, than Tito. When we went to the World Series in 2016, the next spring, people wanted to get their picture with the American League Championship trophy. In your case, the World Series trophy. We haven't done that yet. But Tito had said, look, I'm setting aside X number of hours for the next 3 days. And the only way I will do a picture with the championship trophy with somebody is if everybody is included. I mean, the people that clean the stadium at night. I mean, the people that are part of the janitorial staff, part of the maintenance. With Tito, there was no class system. There was, no food chain where somebody was more important than the other. This is arguably as good a manager as the game has ever seen. If he is an example, and I thought I had parents that were the same way, you better treat people the right way. And who are you to think you're better than somebody else?
Well, that's it in a nutshell. It's interesting as you mentioned that. I was thinking about an experience or an occurrence that I saw with Matt Quatrero. By the way, we're used to using nicknames for anybody that doesn't know, Tito's Terry Francona, the longtime manager of the Phillies, the Red Sox, and the Cleveland Indians / Guardians, and now retired for now, who knows? And Q is Matt Quatrero, the Royals manager, second year. I remember last year in Q's first year, we were somewhere. It might have even been in Houston where I'm at now. Now, whatever. I could always remember like side of the field, first base or third base when we're on the road. Okay, if it's third base side, it can't be this team. If it's first base, based on where the dugout's at. But regardless, we're getting ready to interview Q. I think it was in Texas, and not Houston, the Rangers. And we're gathering around him, and so I've got my cameraman, local cameraman, and we have what we call the runner, who would be, and you talk about class system or a lack of a class system, hopefully. That's someone that's just being paid to come on the crew and take that memory card, it used to be the tape from the camera, and run it out to the truck, or do all these little things to bring everything in. Nobody knows who they are. It's a fun job if you like baseball. And we're getting ready to do the interview, and Q is asking this woman as many questions as possible about her background and how she got there. And I was sitting there thinking, boy, how many people have asked the runner about how they got there? And I'll take it a step further, Hammy.
And meant it.
When I first met Q before his first season, in the off season, he started grilling me about how I got to where I got to. And I'm a little bit more of a high profile position than the runner. No coach or manager had ever asked me that before. How'd you start? How did you get here? Tell me your story.
Yeah.
That is something that is really unique in the game, and it's awfully endearing too. So I've got to think that for you to have all those years with Tito Francona, look, you are wired to do this no matter who it is. The best, the worst, and everybody in between. The difficult, the easy, whatever it might be. To have that has to be one of the greatest blessings of your life.
Yeah. I mean, Joel, you said it. And I had a chance. We had our charity golf outing after you folks left town and played in Houston. We had it this past Thursday. Tito came from Tucson, Arizona. Now, there are no direct flights from Tucson to Cleveland. And he came to be a part of that charity event. And again, that speaks volumes. And to see some of our current players and some of the other guys that played for Tito that have come back as alums, I mean, the love that they have. And as Tito said, what he misses, he doesn't miss some of the stuff that goes on around the game. He misses the clubhouse. He misses the relationships. And I've never met anybody that was better at creating relationships. And that's why Q was a perfect fit here in Cleveland, then went with Kevin Cash. I mean, the beauty of those guys too, as you know, Joel, you better not be thin-skinned when Tito was around or the coaching staff, no matter who you were and no matter where you were on the food chain, because the way they gave it back and forth to each other was incredible. I mean, Kevin Cash was a bullpen coach here. It was either 1 or 2 years, Joel. It wasn't long. And then, boom, he's the manager of the Tampa Bay Rays. Well, he also played for Tito in Boston. Tito used to say, I asked him one time, did you ever think, when Cashy was playing for you, do you look at certain guys and say, hey, this guy, he'll be a coach or a manager someday? And he goes, every time he walked to the plate, I was wishing he was a coach. And he goes, he's the only guy in the history of the game to have a walk away song, not a walk up song. I mean, they would just throw darts at each other, and those guys would give it back to Tito, and that's what they loved. None of those guys, and that includes Brian Sweeney, who's now your pitching coach, all of these guys have the ability to laugh at themselves and realize that none of us is changing lives. None of us is a brain surgeon. None of us is discovering a cure for cancer. Keep things in perspective. Enjoy the game. And, that's what makes it special. And I know you're seeing it and have seen it here the last 2 years. What a treat it is to be around a staff like you have in Kansas City.
Yeah, and I've thought about this a lot. I know my role is very different than yours, but the commonality along with being in the game is that, and I totally agree with you. We're not changing lives. We're not gonna make any impact in terms of curing cancer or whatever it might be. Yet, when people are suffering from those type of awful occurrences, they do turn to us, and we are that voice in our different capacities. And that, I don't even need to ask. I mean, we all get it. You get stopped by the random stranger or fan. They're a stranger maybe to us. We're not a stranger to them. And it's that when my father was alive, we used to sit and listen or watch and all of that. And so you understand that you're in these people's lives every single day. And it's such what can infuriate me sometimes is when I hear people, look, we all bitch about our, jobs for this or that, or, oh man, this is I overheard a guy the other day in the press box in Cleveland talking about, I've covered the game a long time, but it's a game against Kansas City on a Tuesday. Who cares? Give me the playoffs. And I'm like, first off, this is a battle for first place. Second of all, if you can't be happy about coming to the ballpark, go do something else. There are a million people that would change. I know this is what you do every single day, but from the farm kid growing up in Wisconsin to being the voice of the Cleveland Guardians and getting to talk about baseball every single day with excitement and emotion, I mean, how much better does it get? It can't, right?
I haven't worked a day in my life. That's how I look at the last 35 years. I mean, granted, we do work at it, but it's a labor of love. How many people get up in the morning, can't wait to go to work? And to your point, I unfortunately had a folder of mine, binder, whatever you want to call, stolen at an airport. And of all the important things that were in it, was something I had carried for years. It was a letter done in Braille, um, writing to me saying, "This is the point of the day I look forward to." This was a blind
Mm,
person taking the time to send something in Braille that, thanks for the ball game because you were listening, or that you were literally the eyes of this person. And you're like, so I'm going to complain about getting into a hotel at 5 a.m. and we have a game that night? Whatever. There are people doing manual labor. And we can go on and on. It sounds like you're trying to be a martyr when you talk like this, but it's like, to your point, Joel, when I hear people complain about this, it's like, you know what? Be careful what you wish for,
yeah.
because someday you'll have to get a real job, and
Mhm.
you'll long for a game between Kansas City and Cleveland on a Tuesday in August.
Yeah.
This is the part, and you and I've talked about it, and Ryan Lefevre and I talked about it when you guys were in your heydays in the 15 and 6 and 2014, and it's like, no matter how those things had turned out, you had a 6-month journey that people will never forget. Now, granted, it ended the way you wanted to, but does anybody ever look back at 14 and go, "Oh, what a disappointing year. We didn't win it all"?
Mhm.
No, you had 6 months of baseball that captured you day in and day out, plus an incredible postseason. And, everybody just wants to get to the final destination instead of enjoying this 6-month journey that gives us something to look forward to each and every day.
That's it in a nutshell right there. So if I go back to the farm days and the young days of a Tom Hamilton spent watching Green Bay Packers games, and I suspect probably going to church and then the bar with your parents on a Sunday morning, or I don't know, that seems to be part of
Well,
all
we're
the waking
Irish,
up.
so you're pretty close.
Irish in Wisconsin. I know what Sundays look like there. I know what Friday nights look like there. Oh, there's nothing better than especially fall in
Yeah.
Wisconsin. Winter, not always so much. But what were the aspirations of a young Tom Hamilton growing up in Wisconsin?
You wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. And then in high school, reality hit, and it was like, holy smokes, I better have a second plan. And the first guy that told you that was your head coach. And so, to me, if you weren't good enough to play at, the next level or professionally, maybe because I was born with a big mouth. And I mean, it seemed like every report card, the sisters at St. Joe's Elementary School would check lack self-control. So it was like, that got me in trouble every time you're walking into the house with that report card. But maybe that was the sign that, your mouth wouldn't always get you in trouble. It might pave the way for a way to make a great living. And so that was the dream at an early age. I mean, I'm dating myself, but, the reality is I'm old. But, I was able to listen literally back in, the early 60s. Now I was just a kid, but, we had the Milwaukee Braves, and those were the days of Hank Aaron and Eddie Matthews and Warren Spahn and Lou Burdette and Joe Torre, and you can go on and on and on. And literally, there were no TV games, Joel. The only game you got was the NBC Game of the Week on a
Right.
Saturday. And so to listen to a guy like Earl Gillespie, who talk about a dream come true, I ended up doing University of Wisconsin football games with him at one point in my career. That was as big a thrill as I've ever had in my life. And but anyhow, for sitting literally on a porch in a farm in Wisconsin, and hearing a game coming from Wrigley Field or Cincinnati or New York, in the days when Milwaukee was, a National League team, that just seemed like Camelot. That just seemed like,
Hmm.
the incredible dream. And I've been really one of the lucky ones that dream came true. And so that's where it began for me. And I was lucky growing up in Wisconsin. We really had incredible play-by-play people, starting with Earl Gillespie. Then when the Brewers came to town, it was Merle Harmon and Bob Uecker. And of course, Merle Harmon, for people that may not know the name, ended up working for NBC. He was, if you ever listened to the 1969 New York Jets, he was the radio voice of the Jets that won the Super Bowl, with Joe Namath. And Gary Bender worked in Madison. I got to know Gary Bender, who then became, the voice of CBS Sports. He calls some of those great NCAA tournaments, the incredible North Carolina State win that they had no business beating Houston in the Final Four. So to have people, and then Eddie Doucette was doing the Milwaukee Bucks at a time when they had a guy named Lou Alcindor. And so I was blessed to listen. At the time, I thought they were great, but now you look back at it and you're like, oh yeah, they were really good. They were really incredible voices in sports. So they were great role models to try to pattern your career after.
Yeah, and so you refer to yourself as being old now. I don't think of you as that at all, by the way. And you know that in our business, you don't ever say anyone's old. You just say they're a veteran. But the shoe is on the other foot now, right? You got a lot of young up and coming broadcasters, and hopefully they want to pick your brain. I get a lot of sideline people and hosts that some want to pick your brain, some don't. Yep. I'm here for whoever wants to be, and if not, that's fine too. But the world's changed too, right? I mean, look, your kids are, I think your kids are probably right in the middle of that kind of transition and mine are a little bit younger, but in college now, where they've never known anything but a cell phone and all the social media and everything. That's not just television and radio and baseball and sports. That's the world. What are you seeing? I mean, I'll reference back when we started this podcast about you get in there and talk to everyone. And some do, some don't. Susan Waldman, we were talking about her the other night with the Yankees. Sometimes I feel like, and I actually wrote a chapter about her in my next book that's coming up in December, because sometimes I think she knows the players on teams better than their own people know them. Yeah, she works at it. You work at it. Are we missing that nowadays? I don't want to do blanket statement on everybody. Generations are supposed to change, and then as guys like you and I get older, we're supposed to bitch about it, I guess. But do you see some similarities still to the past? I mean, look, the world's not the same as it was when Ernie Harwell was with us, and the world's not going to be the same when we're gone. But what are you seeing?
Well, I blame parents. I'm a big believer in there are no bad kids, there are bad parents. And it starts with mom and dad. I mean, I had a dad that if you were walking down the street in Waterloo didn't take long. But if you were coming out of church, or if you were coming out of a restaurant or whatnot, and you didn't say hi and look at the person that was walking by you, if I heard it once, of course, my kids will say, oh my God, Dad's told us the same thing. My dad used to say, it doesn't cost you a nickel to look somebody in the eye and say hi and shake their hands and look them in the eye. That's what we've lost in my mind, because Manny Acta called it best. When Manny was our manager, he's one of the great people in our game and now a coach with Seattle. Manny called this generation head down. And I'm like, oh my God, that nails it. Everyone's got their head down, looking at their phone. How many times are you walking somewhere and people run into you because they're not looking, they're on their phone, just anyhow. The point being is that's not how you communicate. And you better enforce it in your kids that, look, what you put in a text or what you put in an email has a completely different connotation sometimes in what the person reading that maybe thinks of what that message was, instead of you picking up the phone or talking to them person to person. And that's my most disappointing thing with, we have young people coming in our game who are tremendously talented. But they wouldn't introduce themselves if their life depended on it. And so I don't understand why we've gotten away from that. I blame society as a whole. I blame parents for not instilling that in their children. But, at the end of the day, that's where we've lost, I think, our society. And now I'm pontificating on my soapbox, but can we have some common courtesy? Can we get back to being nice to each other? Can we get back to conversing with each other? It's not that difficult.
No, amen to all of that. Couple final ones before I get to my baseball theme questions. Did you always have the big call? I mean, I think every announcer is known for their style, but you call the game. It works so perfectly too. You call the game in a lot of ways to me like a moment in a hockey game or a football game, and that doesn't always work. It works perfectly for you where I'm on the edge of my seat if I'm in a booth next to you waiting for that big moment, and it's always so exciting. Not everything is at a 10, but you go and get that. I'm sure it just comes naturally, but where did all of that come from? How did it develop?
You know what, Joel? It's a great question. I've been asked to perform. I don't know. And that's why I tell kids, you have to go do games. I was doing a high school football game on plywood plank on the top of a pickup truck. And then later on, we learned that day there was cabbage there. And all of a sudden, it's becoming sauerkraut because it's so hot. And so that was a great aroma. But when you start that way, that's how you start. I did, high school basketball and football games for years, and then high school baseball, American Legion, before you ever get to do some minor league stuff. To me, it only comes from repetition. And, you always tell kids or the young people that do ask for advice, you have to be yourself, whoever that is. I appreciate the kind words, but Denny Matthews is an icon in Kansas City and has his own style, and it's revered. If people heard me come in and do a game at Kansas City, they go, who is this idiot? So, I'm lucky enough that people in Cleveland like it. And I think, you talked about it. How would John and Susan's almost theatrical approach work anywhere else but Broadway? They're absolutely perfect for New York City and how they have entertained those fans for years. I think that's the beauty of our game, Joel. And I think sometimes we're getting away from that. And I don't always blame the young broadcasters. I blame the people that are doing the hiring, that sometimes they want to neuter everyone's personality. Now you have to be careful. You have to earn that right. I call games differently now than when I was working with Herb Score. If I'd have called maybe games like I do now with Herb, he'd have thrown me out on the booth. That would have been me laying out on the netting, covering the home plate area, because, you better earn the trust of your audience. And that was why I was so lucky. Herb was an icon here. And if Herb accepted me, the audience was going to accept me because they trusted Herb. So I was lucky in that regard. And it enabled me to have 8, 9, 10 years where I could kind of fully develop my own. So I felt like I had a style, obviously, coming out. That's how I got the job. Eventually, somebody likes your style and you get hired. But you had to be careful when, you can't come in here like a bulldozer and you're working with a guy that's been here forever. Show some respect for a guy like Herb who had earned it and deserved it. But how it came about, I think you have to be true to your personality. Sometimes I wish I was more reserved or pulled back more, but at the end of the day, Joel, you are who you are. If the ball club likes it and the audience likes it, you'll stay around. If they don't, I'll be back farming. So that's not the only thing I know.
You're not farming.
My dad sold the farm for one reason, Joel. I was the oldest of 5, and he looked at me and he said, my God, if you take over this farm, that'll be the end of it. So he was wise. He saw ahead and realized that I was not the answer.
I don't know if that would have been his exact words. I know that you telling that story, not in front of the camera, would have come out with some different words too. we love our off-camera conversations. Again, rain delays that's how we enjoy each other's company. We get out there and we share those stories. Last thing, before the baseball theme question, we talk about younger generations, not just broadcasters, players. I mean, these players now are my kids' age, and they're younger than your kids. A lot of them, the best young players coming in right now, 21, 22 years old. you still have to connect with them. You don't have to, but I think you're always going to. How are you finding ways to connect with the younger generation?
Hey, you go and talk to them, and some want to, some don't. Like, you guys have a superstar, and I'm always very careful of how much I talk to Bobby Witt because people are pulling at him all the time because he's truly one of the faces of the game now. But I mean, when you see a Bobby Witt and the few times that I've been able to talk to him and whatnot, you know the game is in great hands. I mean, this is truly, the good Lord does bless some people with it all, or so we think. I mean, he's what you want for the face of your franchise. I think you and I were talking about it. Does Kansas City, the fans, realize they've had George Brett and now Bobby Witt Jr. in their same lifetime? I mean, I think when it's all said and done, if Bobby can stay healthy, obviously he'll stay motivated. He plays the game for all the right reasons. He comes from a terrific family. You're going to have a guy that's going to be right up there someday with George Brett, with a statue wherever the next ballpark is. And, he's just special. So you want to meet those kids and, you try to talk with them. We have a group of really terrific young people on our club. We don't have really any bad apples. So I've been lucky that way. One of the things I think, and I feel the same thing is true in Kansas City, these front offices look at character as much as they do talent, because when you're in Kansas City and you're in Cleveland, you can't afford certain guys from a character standpoint, or they're not worth what happens maybe off the field, that type of thing. And so I think for the most part, that's why you see these two clubs that play all out all the time. You don't hear about them in the news from a negative standpoint. They're not making headlines. I think J.J. Picola and Chris Antonetti go to bed every night not going, I wonder when I'm going to get a phone call at 3 a.m. because of such and such. And that, that's a byproduct of doing your homework on these young players. So, look, I mean, as you get older, it's just a fact of life that the younger players aren't going to have as much in common with you, but you can still try and talk to them. You can still, but I also understand that they kind of look at you in a different way than they did 35 years ago. That's okay. That unfortunately,
okay. Yeah.
That's life,
Yeah. I'm getting there myself, and I'm okay with it. I'm comfortable with it. I am. I do my baseball themed questions, and I always ask every guest, what's the biggest home run you've hit professionally? And I always feel like if I have a baseball player on, I could say you could pick a home run or actually something in terms of your business. But do you have a favorite home run call among the many?
Boy, Joel, I've been lucky because we've been in the playoffs 13 years that I've been here, which is really a lot when you think of a market this size, and been lucky enough to be in 3 World Series. Boy, as far as biggest calls, one of the biggest, believe it or not, was Jason Giambi in 2013 when we had not been relevant for a long time. And that was Tito's first year. And that was the year when Tito got hired, Joel. A lot of us were like, huh? He wants to come here? And not taking anything away from us, but we've been losing 90 games every year.
This is a world championship manager.
2 times, who never deserved to be treated the way he was by Boston. But that's another story. And because of the way he was treated by that ownership and front office, that's why we got him. Because he wanted to work in an organization where he could trust people and he knew he wouldn't be stabbed in the back. And so we got lucky because of that. Now, you don't think we're going to be much better. We didn't add that many players and whatnot. And we go from being a non-entity for a number of years to last week and a half of the year, we got a chance to potentially get in as a wild card team. And we had given up the lead in extra innings to the White Sox, and Jason Giambi, who is without question one of the best leaders we ever had here.
Yeah,
I've never seen a guy make an impact as much as he did in such a short period of time and not be an everyday player. And he hits a walk-off 2-run home run off the White Sox. and we win that game. We win the last 10 in a row, get into the wild card playoffs, which was a monumental step. That was certainly one of the biggest ones. I mean, back in the 90s, Joel, it just seems like there was one big home run after another. Paul Sorrento hit a 3-run home run when we were down 7-0 to David Cohn. Manny Ramirez hits a walk-off home run against the unhittable Dennis Eckersley in extra innings to beat the Oakland A's. I mean, those are some, you're kind of a prisoner of the moment, because you forget some of the big ones. I mean, Jimmy comes back here and hits a home run to left field in his return, to Cleveland, and obviously one of the most beloved players we've ever had. So, I mean, those are some. It's hard to really narrow it down.
Yeah.
For me, my best moment ever is there are two. Your first game in the big leagues, because you're no different than a player. It's like, I just won the lottery. How the heck did this happen? And, it's 1990 and second inning. You talk about rain and double headers. Well, we had a blizzard. So the second inning, we get snowed out. And it was like, welcome to Cleveland. So you had to get nervous all over again for your first game the next day. And then I thought one of the best moments we've had, again, you're lucky when you've been in 3 World Series, but I didn't have the call. Herbie had the call. But in 1995, we're facing the Seattle Mariners in Game 6 against the unbeatable Randy Johnson. And we are down late in that ball game, runners second and third, Kenny Lofton at second, Dan Wilson, the catcher, Randy Johnson. If they win that game, Game 7's at the Kingdom, you weren't beating them. And you were like, how are we going to beat Randy Johnson? And he throws a pitch that's a little offline and somehow kind of handcuffed Dan Wilson. Kenny Lofton scored the go-ahead run from second on a pass ball. Who has the guts to take that chance at that moment with the season on the line? And that's why Kenny Lofton was such a special player. And at that point, even though the game wasn't over, Joel, you were like, this club's going to its first World Series in 41 years.
These stories are so great, and they'll live forever. And it's, we're so lucky just to be I always say a small part of them, a bigger part than most. How about a swing and a miss along the way? I don't know, maybe a good blooper. There are a million of those, I'm sure, even though I'm not suggesting that you would ever have one. But
oh God, I had us winning the game when we tied the game. We were down. It's the greatest comeback in Indians history. 2001. That was the year with Ichiro was the MVP and Rookie of the Year. Seattle won 116 games. They came here late that summer, and it was a Sunday night game. And we ended up playing each other in the first round of the playoffs, but Seattle was unbeatable. Joel, they're up 14-2 after the 6th inning. And we come back and beat them in extra innings. Omar Vizquel ties it up. Of course, I had us winning it in the bottom of the 9th inning, but it only tied the game. So that one, you didn't sleep for literally 2-3 days, And fortunately, we won it in extra innings. But it was such a crazy thing. And I just, it was a good lesson that, hey, if you get so caught up in this, you're not doing your job. And I got burned. I'm sure there are so many countless, we haven't got enough time to go through all the bloopers, but that's one you sit there and there's always things you've said on the air that you wish you could take back. And, unfortunately, we're live. And, I think in this day and age, you just every night you're like, be smart. And because no matter what you say, somebody can take it and post it. Next thing you know, you're unemployed.
Yeah. Look, I've had friends say to me, boy, in this day and age, aren't you worried that you could lose your job? No, it's just common sense. It's the equivalent. The best way I could explain it to people is that when you had young kids and you were told don't swear in front of them, you didn't.
Right.
Well, maybe not always, right? And so you had to put a little money in the jar or whatever it was. But
then you blamed
you just
Tom because Johnny didn't hear that from me.
The best thing is my wife took credit for it all. So. I just said that the other day in the car. Now, anyway. The last one is small ball. What are the little things? What does small ball mean to you, Hammy?
You know what? Again, I just think we're a byproduct of where we grew up, how we grew up, and what your mom and dad taught you. And I know there are so many more talented people in this industry and people that didn't get it. But I always felt like if you had the work ethic that my mom and dad had, you always had a chance. And to me, it was always about, good Lord, you know, you would cut the lawn back, and when you're cutting lawn out on a farm, it's a lot of grass with all the buildings and everything. I mean, you look back at it now. When you were a kid, you were like, "This is going to take a week." Well, it didn't take a week, but bottom line was, if you missed a spot, and oh my gosh, my dad would, hey, there's no reason why you can't do this right. You're going to do it, and you're going to keep doing it until you get it right. And
Yeah.
at the time, you're like, what the heck? Why are you being so hard on me? Well, it taught you that, if you're going to do it right. And those are the little things you maybe don't appreciate at the time. You think your parents are just being hard on you. And but my mom and dad, I saw how hard they worked, whether it was on the farm or when we moved to town. My dad worked at a printing shop called Perry Printing that was a part of the Milwaukee Journal. And here in this little town of Waterloo, it employed 500 people printing Sports Illustrated and People Magazine and Time and Newsweek. And, 1 week dad would work days, 1 week he'd work nights. They were working 12-hour shifts when they got busy and they could make that extra money. They were working sometimes 7 days a week. And, you saw that, and you saw how hard he worked, and times he couldn't come to your games in high school because of the job. And, again, at the time, you don't realize the imprint that puts on you. But I always thought, like, if I'm not going to get a job, or if I do get a job, I'm not going to lose the job because I quit working. And to me, I know it sounds like you're pontificating, but it's really a simple thing. And I think what you see with the good baseball teams, whether it's Kansas City or Cleveland this year, not comparing myself to that, but they're all about doing the little things. And in life, everybody wants to jump ahead and do the things that are fun. You've got to do the little grunt work. And I had two boys that were talented enough and worked their tails off, to play D1 baseball and both play in the minor leagues for a bit. And I saw how hard they worked, but it was ingrained in them by their coaches. Hey, you're going to do T work first. No, we're not going to go out and hit. You're going to do all the little things that you and I see the major leaguers do. And it works in every walk of life. I don't care if you're a mailman, a hairstylist, whatever. It's kind of a proven formula, isn't it?
Yeah. Secret to life. All right, we're going to wrap it up with 4 quick ones. The first one, we'll go short on these. It's a question I get asked more than any other question. I think all of us do. What's your favorite stadium? And I always say it's hard to say in some ways because we don't see it the way fans do. So we may like the best booth, or for me, the quickest and easiest access to the field. Although I get a lot of more steps in, I lose a little bit of weight in Cleveland because the booth is so far from the field and back and forth. So that's always good to get a little extra in there. So I'll ask it to you this way, and this is the way I always view it too. I always say, what's your favorite stadium of the 29 others? Because you can't compare your own house to somebody else's. It's where you live. For me, it's Fenway. I don't know that I would want to work there every single day, but to be there 3 days a year in the small confines feels like you're going back in time. But how about for you? You got a favorite?
You know what? I mean, when you're at Fenway, to me, you're in church. That's kind of how I look at it. It's one of the cathedrals of baseball. I like it better. And look, I like Wrigley. Don't get me wrong. I think it's awesome. I like Fenway better. There's just something about Fenway that to me, it's never been replicated and it never will be. And then literally, and I don't say this, you made a great point. Like, for instance, everyone's got, isn't Pittsburgh a beautiful stadium? Well, sure. If you wanted to call a game from the blimp, it's a great place, maybe for you as a fan. But for me, when the hitter looks that big, there's another home run hit to deep left, caught by the shortstop.
I was just about to say that.
It's awful. That Washington, anyhow. So literally, it's hard for me to, Fenway's in a league of its own because we're never going. No matter how great you make a new ballpark, you can't make Fenway. But of the new ballparks, I love Seattle, I love Target Field, Minneapolis, and I love Kauffman Stadium. And again, they're great venues. They've stood the test of time. They're a great place to broadcast from. And I also like those cities. I think that's part of it. And that's not to dismiss any of the new ballparks. I think Atlanta's got a beautiful ballpark. But, I mean, if I wanted to go to an NBA game and wear headphones so that I don't lose all my hearing, that's what I would recommend you do if you want to go to Atlanta. I don't know why some of these ballparks need to be filled to capacity and then just blaring you out of the ballpark. That's not our game. And so I think the parks I all mentioned still get it from the standpoint of louder's not better. So those unequivocally would be my favorite parks. And then after that, you can lump a bunch of them.
Yeah, I went to one concert this summer, plus I went to Dodger Stadium, and so there was that too. Anyway, still have not regained my hearing. I haven't regained my hearing, but I think I was right by the speaker down in the field too, so I definitely heard more of the music that was blaring than my producer, which may or may not explain why the shows were good or bad. I don't remember.
San Francisco is really good too, don't you think,
Oh,
Joe?
beautiful. Yeah, and San Diego too. I like San Diego.
You just look out into the harbor and go, okay, there's another ship. But again, they were built like Minneapolis was. Those are the two smallest plots of land that any ballpark's been built on. Yeah. And it's cozy because of that.
All right, so this is 4 final questions round of the bases. That was number one. Number two, I won't limit you to one word, but sentence 2 to describe who I believe is one of the most underrated superstars in the game, Jose Ramirez. Nobody talks about him. Right. Maybe, the diehards do. Maybe it's because we see him so much. He does it over and over and over again. What makes him so special?
Just what we talked about. His work ethic, Joel, is unmatched. We had a hitting coach here who's no longer here, and Victor would say that literally 7 to 10 days after the season, whether we were in the World Series, the playoffs, or didn't make it, 7 to 10 days, whenever our season ended, Hosey would send him videos of him hitting in his backyard. He's got in the Dominican Republic, he's got his own, batting area, cage, whatever. What do you think? 10 days after the season? That's why he's one of the faces of the game. I think he's underrated for a couple of reasons. We haven't won a World Series. He does it every year, Joel. I mean, every year he's been, and I should have my notes here with me. He's been top 5 of the most valuable player award 5 times, I think it's now been, and he will be again this year, Yeah. And I also think when your best player plays the game harder than anybody else, that just sets the tone for everybody else. And one of the things I don't think we say enough about when it comes to Latin players, he is the smartest baseball player I've ever been around. Watch him, how he's never taking his eyes off the field. When he's in the dugout, he is laser focused. He's the smartest base runner I've ever seen. His baseball instincts are unmatched.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be with Albert Pujols for a lot of years, one of the smartest players ever. Lucky enough to be with Salvador Perez for 14 years, one of the smartest players ever. I think oftentimes that is not understood because if the language barrier doesn't enable people to say, wait a minute, this guy's really smart. You got to look beyond that and understand that these guys, if they were speaking perfect English, you would say, oh my gosh, that's the smartest guy. And the language has no bearing whatsoever. on the intelligence. It is an absolute joy, while also miserable for an opposing team, I guess, to watch Jose Ramirez. Okay, I'll ask you the same question for my third question about Bob Uecker, someone that I know is one of your heroes.
Yeah.
You want to say that you're getting old. I'm not going to call Bob Uecker old. I'm just in amazement that he is still doing this a little bit in his 90s. I know that I can say, and you'll agree with this, there will never be another Bob Uecker. And I know that you feel incredibly fortunate to have had him in your life.
Yeah.
How would you sum up Bob Uecker?
Yeah, and I should have mentioned him, Joe. I'm glad you brought him up because Bob did all those games with Merle Harmon and then eventually became the lead voice for the Brewers. And I don't think Bob's ever been given enough credit for what a great baseball play-by-play man he is. He is hilarious, and he's revered in Wisconsin. I think you and I were talking about it. Look, Bob's 90, and we just played there a week ago, so I was able to spend about 15 minutes with him because, I'm not trying to be verbose or anything like that, but you when someone's 90, you don't know when you're going to see him again and be able to spend time with him because he won't travel like he used to, so you're only going to get that chance if you see him in Milwaukee, and he's as sharp. He's as funny. People always say, well, tell me a Bob Uecker story. And it's like, well, if I tell you, I get fired. Bob won't get fired, but I'll get fired for repeating the story because they're all great stories, but we're not going to repeat them. And He is so quick and so revered by his players. I mean, when we were there, Joel, Bob didn't get up to the booth until there was like maybe 45 minutes to an hour to the game. He was still in the Brewers clubhouse. His energy is spent down there with those guys. How about players today revering Bob? Bob has kept himself relevant with these players. He's kept himself young. And it's always been for him about the players because he was a player. But the way he connects with that ball club, and to see that enthusiasm, and, all of us hope, if we are lucky enough to live to be 90, that we still have our faculties and our health and are able to get around like Bob does. And, look, Vin Scully's the greatest who's ever done it. The loss of Vin was a loss for everybody in baseball. People have no idea when Bob hangs them up, or when the good Lord calls him, it will be devastating for that state because it's not just Milwaukee. It's the Packers love him. The Bucks love him. The Badgers love him. Whether you're in Shell Lake, Wisconsin, or Wausau, or Minocqua, or Milwaukee, or Madison, Bob's the most revered person, I think, that at least in my time, and, I haven't been in Wisconsin now for, almost 40 years, but, still have family there and friends. He's the most revered person in the state of Wisconsin in my lifetime. Yeah. And that includes Vince Lombardi.
Yeah.
And that includes some of the great whomever, whether it was Hank Aaron back in the day with the Braves, or Brett Favre, or Bart Starr, or, you can go on and on. Elroy Hirsch at Wisconsin. This is the most revered man in the state of Wisconsin. And I just hope we're talking about Bob 10 more years from now.
Yeah. Got me thinking back to my old days of hearing him in the car, driving around covering high school sports, and even before Madison, up in my days in Wausau and Rhinelander, and certainly spent time in Minocqua and the good old Wausau East Lumberjacks, I believe is what they were. I might be wrong on that one. I don't know. Anyway, those are the good old days.
Still sets in left field. You still have to, because Wausau now is where they have my sons played there in the Northwoods.
The Wood Bat League, right?
The Wood Bat League.
That little old stadium.
Well, they've modeled it. It is beautiful.
Really? Okay.
One thing they can't change is the direction of the ballpark. Some idiot thought it was okay for the sun to set beyond left field. So when I was doing minor league games, you had to stop the game because Wausau was in with Appleton and whatnot. You can't have the hitter blinded, So
that's beautiful.
But the thing about all of that you talk about, Joel, with Bob, I always root for a lopsided game because that's when Bob's at his best.
Yeah. All the stories. All right, my walk-off question for you is, and I think one of the beautiful parts of this job and traveling is that you get to know people in every city. I've got my breakfast spot in Cleveland where if I don't show up, the owners are going to call and say, you still doing this? Are you okay? I got a call from them when the Royals won the World Series. And I say this about every city, like every city's great. Would I like to spend more of my off days on the beach or, in fill in the blank Chicago or somewhere like that? Absolutely. But there's not a bad city to me in the big leagues. If you're complaining about any of them, you're getting way too spoiled. Like, oh, this hotel's rough. No, it's not. The travel is good. What do you love most about Cleveland? It has been your home for a long time. The people there, to me, are passionate. They are amazing. Once you get out there and you start to get to know people beyond even the stadium, I could do without all of the rain delays and some of the weather that you guys have, but we can't control those things. What do you love most about Cleveland being your home?
Well, my wife's from Pittsburgh and I'm from obviously Wisconsin. So there aren't a lot of people that move to Cleveland. When you talk about transitional cities or transient cities, Cleveland's not one of them. So most of the people that live here are from Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, or at least, the Buckeye State. So to your point, they are passionate. One, it was an incredible place for us to raise our 4 children. And the school systems are outstanding. Athletics is, and I know that sounds trite or like that shouldn't be the end all, but on top of the great education, athletics means something here. The state of Ohio is really good athletically and in a lot of sports because we have so many big cities. I mean, Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati are all relatively the same size. And all 3 are bigger than Milwaukee, where I, grew up an hour away from Milwaukee. So that gives you a lot of really good athletes and whatnot. But so sports means something here. And so because, if you're in Atlanta, how many people are from Atlanta? They're like, oh, yeah, okay. The Braves are fine, but I grew up a Red Sox fan. Or I moved here from New England, or I moved here from New York. The people here are not apathetic. Now, they'll let you know when they don't care for you or when you've made a mistake, but they're not apathetic. And I think, I'm a product of where you're from. I'm big on the Midwest, whether, to me, Kansas City would be an awesome, if I'd have gotten a job in Kansas City, we never would have left because it's such a great place to raise a family. I feel that way about Minneapolis, and I know some of the things that have gone on there, but that could happen anywhere. And
Agreed.
So the Midwest to me just has a different sense of core values and they care. And so to me, that's been the biggest thing. People here care and people will do anything for you. And, we have Cleveland Clinic here, which is as great a medical facility as there is in the world. And the things that they've done for us and our family and countless other families, you just realize how fortunate you are.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better and feel the same way about Cleveland, about Minneapolis. Detroit is only different for me because we stay far out in the suburbs. I know you do too,
Yeah.
but it just so fortunate
But they
to be able
care.
to do all of that. Then they care always. Hey, really appreciate you spending the time, taking the time. I know that our versions of doing this before a game or during rain delays are a little bit more or less filtered, I shall say, colorful. But this was great. I didn't ask any predictions on what's going to happen the rest of the year because who the hell knows? You don't know. I don't know. It's just going to be fun, and we get to be along for the ride. So, Hammy, keep it up. Of course, as always, I am so lucky to be able to have these conversations with you, and looking forward to whenever I see you next. I know as this comes out, the Guardians are in Kansas City, but I don't think you're not. Are you coming to that or no?
No, I'm taking Kansas City, LA off. I didn't want to, but we have some things going on here that have to be taken care of, and so club's good enough to give me a few days off there. But I'll miss coming to because those games are going to mean so much, you
Yeah.
know. And
Well,
what I'm happy
maybe
about,
we'll face each other in the playoffs.
yeah, and you know, Kansas City's got something to be excited about again. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, as great as 15 and 14 were, it's been a long time, and now to have meaningful games in September, that's what we all go to spring training for, isn't it? To play games in September that means something.
Yep, no doubt about it. Hammy, thanks so much. Appreciate you spending
Thanks,
time today.
Joel. Good being with you, and the feelings mutual on everything you said as well. Thank you, pal.
It's around the bases. Everybody knows Joe Goldberg.